I'm good at controlling what my daughter's exposed to, but sex is everywhere. I wish they'd make, like, sex blocking equipment so I could monitor everything she sees and hears. There's so much sex on TV. And the music these days, I just wish there was a better way to shield her from it. Because she's not ready to think about that stuff.
You can't control your kids' exposure to sex.
But you can influence how they behave.
So talk to them.
Tell them you want them to wait to have sex.
Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I am Jen, this is Fundy Fridays, and here on my channel I talk about different aspects of Christian fundamentalism, American conservative politics, pop culture, and gay stuff. Today we are going to be talking about purity culture, but not just the idea and concept of it, which we will discuss, but more like how was it implemented? You know, the rise of purity rings, specifically, like, we're going to be talking about silver ring thing and true love waits, but we're also going to be talking about Disney Channel stars and their purity rings, because that was a huge phenomenon. And originally that was what the episode was going to just be about, was just the Disney purity rings. I had to find out more, and I was like, okay, well, how did this start, and how far back does it go, and how did it get into the schools, and what other shit were they forcing on y'all back in the day? We're going to be talking about all of that. I actually have experience with today's subject for once, and yeah, I grew up in the Bible Belt in a small town, and we had abstinence only education. We had a modesty assembly, although that's not what they called it, and we had somebody 2 years in a row, 8th grade and 9th grade, a woman who had HIV came in and lectured us all about the powers of abstinence, and I never ever forgot that. I would love to know what she's up to now. Yeah, I've just been kind of on the edges and outskirts of Christianity a lot growing up, and I didn't really fully understand how prevalent it was until I was an adult. But we'll get into that. Since we're going all over the place, I kind of need to give us a roadmap, okay? And go in as best order as I can, and I can't wait to tell you all my personal life stories about this shit, because it's weird. We're going to talk about not just purity culture, but abstinence-only education in schools, and we're going to talk about all of the presidents who had a hand in that. The preaching to teens, the trying to get them involved and having them be excited about it, the purity rings, the celebrity endorsements, the, like, concerts and conferences and marches to the Washington Monument, like educational videos that came out of this movement.
What if I want to have sex before I get married?
Well, I guess you just have to be prepared to die.
That silver ring thing, true love waits, why wait was another movement. I Kiss Dating Goodbye. We're going to talk about purity balls, which I found out Mike Johnson took his daughter to. And then we're going to wrap all that up with the modern era sex education in America, because, you know, now everything's all about, you know, they're grooming the children with the pronouns or whatever. So we gotta talk about that. And I hope that this whole thing kind of paints this really troubling but interesting picture.
True love waits, you gotta say. When you're feeling weak, you gotta pray. Yo, word to your mother.
What is purity culture? It's, you know, a set of ideals and social standards and lingo and culture. It's an idea that became a real thing. So people who participate in purity culture, whether it be the adults or the teenagers or younger, a lot of times this indoctrination starts in childhood, pre-puberty, and it's the idea that your virginal status or lack thereof affects your pureness, this like pureness, untouched, unspoiled, like godly, pure, whole, like, vibe. Like, it's hard to describe because it's a social construct.
17-year-old girl talking to her high school friends who had been kidding her about her virginity and everything else. Finally, she said, I'd had enough. And she said, look, I don't want any more jokes about my virginity. I don't want any more pressure to become sexually involved. Because you need to realize, each one of you need to realize, Whenever I want to, any day that I want to, I can become like you, but you can never again become like me.
People tie it up with their morality or their integrity or their status with God upon this idea of sexual purity. When you talk about things being pure and dirty, when you start applying that to like somebody's identity or their standing with God, like it's like saying that their soul is dirty or that they are dirty or that they're a bad person, they're immoral, tying it up with this sexual aspect, you can see how very quickly that would completely wreck somebody psychologically, like, and socially, because there's peer pressure to stay pure, and then there's repercussions and shame and guilt associated with if you do anything sexual. They call it messing up, or like, you know, they don't want to say it. If you've had sex or if you've done any of the other steps before that, then you're no longer pure. So what do people do? They go ahead and go even farther or do what they want to do, or they'll do it without proper protection because they've been taught that you might as well.
I sit here almost appalled at the newspapers every day and these various headlines that talk to the issue of having safe sex. I think this whole issue of safe sex is indeed a myth.
It could slip off or break.
Okay. It's kind of like you can think of it in terms of Russian roulette. What is it, 1 in 6 that you're going to die? When you use a condom, it's like you're playing Russian roulette. There is less chance that when you pull the trigger, you're going to get a bullet in your head. But who wants to play Russian roulette with a condom?
Okay, so I think we've all seen the, what if I want to have sex before marriage? Well, I guess you just have to be prepared to die clip. We've all seen it on the internet, and I had to know where this was from, so I looked it up. It's from a videotape called No Second Chance from 1991, and you can buy it on Amazon for $20, by the way. And apparently that lady that is in the clip is a nurse named Kathy Kay. Using interviews with the world's leading researchers in the field of epidemiology and the teachings of Kathy Kay, this film presents facts, answers, and solutions that teenagers will understand and respect. It contains the one answer that will protect young people from terminal infection. If you are a parent, this film was for you. If you are a teenager, this film was for you. It has the answer that could save your life, because with AIDS, there is no second chance. Jeremiah Films. Interesting that the number is boob. Wow. A young life is far too great to throw away on one sexual experience or a drug high. D. Turner, a dying AIDS patient. Well, that's really unfortunate that he died, I guess. He might still be alive, but R.I.P. if he did. These types of groups are also teaching that there's no safe way.
Just remember, there is no safe way outside of marriage and outside of Christ. So be strong on your commitment.
They say even condoms aren't going to protect you. No safe way anymore. Or they'll say, oh, well, they won't protect your heart.
You know, because a condom, there is no condom that can protect you from a broken heart and a shattered dream.
They won't protect your soul. So what do people do? They just don't use protection. And then all the horrible stuff that they said was going to happen, it's more likely now.
So it does offer you some protection physically. Remember the 5 aspects of who we are now. We're going back to that first overhead almost. So the condom will protect you physically against some sexually transmitted diseases. So we'll give you a little protection there. Okay. Does that condom do anything at all, to protect you emotionally? Does that condom wrap around your emotions and not allow you to get attached to somebody, not allow you to be embarrassed if they start talking smack about you? Does it do anything like that? No. Absolutely no. Does that condom do anything at all to protect you socially? No. From your friends knowing that you've had sex? Anything? Absolutely no. Does that condom do anything to protect you intellectually? Can it prevent your mind from having that memory of that partner? No, absolutely not. And does that condom do anything to protect you morally? I mean, God's told you, I want you to have the best sex possible. God says this to you. God said, I put it in one boundary of marriage, a man and a woman. That's where I want it to be enjoyed. You want to have the best, most awesome sex possible? Save it for your marriage bed and keep it there. And then do what he told you to do. Enjoy it. That condom does not do one thing to protect you spiritually, morally. So what has that condom really done for you?
And then I'll hear these same people, these pastors, say, oh, well, if you mess up, then, you can repent and then you'll be in God's good graces again. You can say that, but in reality, that's not really what's going to happen, because everybody knows, because you make them confess, because you round everybody up and you say, raise your hand if you've ever done a sex act, and everybody looks at you. Like, what do you think's going to happen? Or, you know what I mean? I guess you don't really know what I mean, but you do know what I mean. Like, we're on the same wavelength. You know what I mean? You get it. You get it. If you're a Jennonite, you get it.
This is Michael Sweet. Abstinence isn't just the only safe way. It's what God intended for us outside of marriage. Here are the facts. 1 in 6 conceptions is aborted. Over 150,000 performed every day.
Yeah, that's Michael Sweet from the Christian hair metal band Stryper. He worked with True Love Waits in the 90s and wrote the song that you're listening to now. And it's horribly dangerous to give out inaccurate information, especially during the AIDS crisis. So, yeah, thanks, Michael.
Come on. If you really love me.
Maybe because I do love you.
Well, then if two people love each other and they want to, then it's okay. Hey, I know you want me.
I just believe it. Well, it's just not safe. Where'd you get that?
School.
You're kidding.
Hey, if they give them to you at school, then they must be safe. Don't worry. It's safe.
Maybe I'm biased because, we didn't have condoms at our school because we were abstinence only. Is that a thing that happens? Because, obviously that was a dig at condom distribution in schools, but, I don't know. Maybe I'm jealous. I got a lot of emotions to process. And so when you base an entire culture off of this thing that's already kind of vague anyway, and you make it extremely, extremely important, sometimes it's treated like it's the most important thing you'll ever do is remain sexually pure. Even if the people follow through with that and they keep their pledge and then they get married and do everything the correct way, a lot of times they're still psychologically in that headspace where they're going to feel dirty anyway. They're going to feel scared. They're going to feel shamed. They're going to cry. Maybe they don't know what's going on. Obviously, I think the women raised in purity culture probably do have it worse than the men, but the men get just as much bullshit, and they're treated like they are these sexual deviant monsters that need to be in a cage, or they're told that their wife's virginal status is a reward given to them because they're objects, and the girl's entire job is to try to keep in a cage their Jezebel spirit and cover up their body, because their body, the thing that they were born with, the thing that they did not choose to have, is causing men and boys their age to stumble, and it is up to them. And then you'll even have the people who kind of half-ass it and are like, well, the boys should keep to themselves and not look, but the girls should also play a role. Somebody's status or standing in a community or with God or anything, basing that off of a yes, no, you have or you haven't had it, you are pure or you're dirty, this black and white thinking. Do you see how demented that is to everyone? Also, I did want to bring up really quick that a lot of times, and not all the time, There are anti-gay messages that are in these youth groups, in these abstinence programs, because they are trying to promote a very specific heteronormative, biblically based worldview. So even if they don't provide conversion therapy services, or even if they don't, platform ex-gay people like an Exodus International situation, there is still those overtones of straight is the only true way to live, and you will go to hell if you sexually sin, and they count having same-sex attraction as being a sin. Some of them will say, oh, it's okay if you're abstinent, but you definitely cannot act on your gay feelings, and that is a part of that. Like, it's all bad. It's all a very twisted take on human sexuality and sexual ethics, and I just wanted you all to be aware. It's not like they're talking about consent and, sexual ethics. They're saying that you're going to become one flesh, and you're going to become an object, and you must submit to your husband. And also, you're a whore.
Oral sex happens everywhere. Kids started having oral sex when I was in 5th grade.
He likes oral sex, and I like giving the oral sex. I don't think that it's a bad thing.
There's girls that I know that have given oral sex to 7 guys in one night.
Oh my fucking God. Think of, I bet offhand you all could think of 10 different types of weird lessons that you were given about purity, whether it be the chewed gum thing or the tape, sticking the tape to each other. Girls are pink, boys are blue, let's not make purple. Having a rose and taking a petal off for each person you've slept with until you're down to a stem. Yeah, that's also making the objectification worse, because you're saying I'm literally a piece of gum. I'm literally a rose with its petals torn off. The fuck?
Come here, Suzanne, over here. Center here. Now, Mike knows Christ. Suzanne is a believer too, okay? We're going to say, Mike, reach around and grab Suzanne's hand. Other way. There you go. Okay, now reach around the other way and grab his hand. Okay, now what we're going to say is that Mike and Suzanne, while they were dating, they got involved in sex together. They're both believers and they both got involved in sex, all right? Now let me tell you what's taking place. Joe, hold this. Let me tell you what's taking place here. What's happened is that even though they've had sex, guess who had to have sex with them? No, not Joel. The person that had to have sex with them, you remember Joel played the person of Christ. And what had to happen? Christ has to have sex with you. And that's the reason that Scripture says that once you're in the body of Christ, that you don't have sex until marriage. Because when you're having to have sex with another partner and you're in Christ, Mike and Suzanne both are in Christ, Christ has to have it with you.
I feel so bad. I only got a little bit of that abstinence only and modesty bullshit at my school, but you guys were in the trenches.
When you take the opportunity to kiss a boy who is not your husband, and you don't know if he's going to be your husband, because there's no guarantees. He hadn't put a ring in your finger, he doesn't even have a job, he's not even out of high school yet, okay? And you're gonna kiss him. You're kissing somebody else's husband until you know otherwise. And what right do you have to kiss someone else's husband if you don't know that he's yours? What's that?
His future husband, I guess.
Well, yeah, somebody's future husband. That's the thing. We don't know. And I tell my young men, you're stealing something that's not yours.
I truly believe that treating purity culture in this way, especially treating getting to take your wife's virginity. I'm sorry. I don't even like saying it. Having that be a prize or something that is aspirational or a goal or a reward, I absolutely believe is why we have the hot wife phenomenon. Not that one, where you have these young pastors being like, my hot wife, me and my hot wife have sexy hot lover sex because I waited and sex is great.
What do you have to say to some of the young people about true love waits?
Oh man, it is worth the wait. Sexual abstinence until you're married is the most unbelievable thing. and it is what the Bible requires, but it's God's way of protecting you also. I can't endorse it enough.
That was one of the members of Petra, another really prolific Christian rock band. They worked with True Love Waits and Why Wait, which we will talk about in just a second. Whether it be the Scopes Monkey trial about evolution in schools, prayer in schools, the Ten Commandments in schools, good news clubs in schools, prayer at the pole, FCA, you name it, you're never more than 2 feet from some sort of religious element in public school in reality. Even though the laws say you're not supposed to have church and state, we got a lot of church and state mixture.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Some
of the abstinence campaigns in the 80s were focused on the prevention of the spread of HIV, because we were having an HIV/AIDS crisis.
Really, up until this point, it's people have thought it was their right to have sex whenever they wanted to. Christians will not be exempt from this disease just because they were raised in a Christian home, or go to a Christian school, or attend a good Bible-believing church. They will only be exempt if they obey what the Bible says about not having sex outside of marriage.
I would rather have AIDS and have the relationship that I have with Jesus Christ than not have AIDS and not know Jesus at all.
For a while, and unfortunately this stereotype still exists, that it was a gay disease, and a lot of religious people felt like it was God punishing the gay community specifically, or just general people who have sex outside of marriage. I mean, they seemed like they were delighting in this. The Moral Majority, which was started by Jerry Falwell Sr. and also co-founded by Paul Weyrich, who also co-founded the Heritage Foundation, which is behind Project 2025. The Moral Majority was a political action group, and they rallied the Christian right together. So multi-denominational group of Christians fighting for policy that they wanted. You know, anti-abortion, anti-gay rights. Thankfully, Jerry had came around on his opinion about segregation by this time, because he was not pro-integration, meaning he did not want the races to mix. He eventually changed his mind. And if he was alive today, I know that he would be spouting off all kinds of crap about the woke left, and he would not be a ally to any group. He also was not pro mixing religion and politics at one point and gave a famous sermon, but he went back on that. So yeah, they rallied the Christian right together, which they were not like a big voting bloc. And finally they united and were one of the reasons why Ronald Reagan got elected. They would put out a magazine, and it was called the Moral Majority Report. And they famously had a Moral Majority Report that was about the threat of AIDS to your average American, painting it as a deadly gay disease that was going to, destroy the fabric of American society. And this picture has been brought up recently because people in the magazine have masks on, and now conservative evangelicals don't like masks. So Ronald Reagan did not acknowledge the AIDS crisis until 1985. Far too late. Over 21,000 Americans had died from AIDS and complications thereof by 1985, the first time that Ronald Reagan, uttered it in public. And it was horrifying. I mean, I didn't live through that, but I've seen videos and things. And it just decimated the gay community. Obviously, straight people died from it as well. They didn't just teach abstinence, they taught not using protection. They acted like it would be worse to use it than to go without. The general Christian right being so bigoted about this when they didn't need to be. They should have been kind and accepting and loving to people who were sick with a disease. Yeah, they did the opposite of love them. They shamed them, said that they were destroying the fabric of society, said that they deserved to die, said that God was punishing them. But there was a very famous Christian at the time who was extremely kind and empathetic to a person with HIV.
And how sad that we as Christians
who are to be the salt of the earth. And we who are supposed to be able to love everyone are afraid so badly of an AIDS patient that we will not go up and put our arm around them and tell them that we care.
Yes. I know, it is tragic, and that's the tragedy
Steve,
of the situation.
I just want to tell you something.
What's that, Tammy?
If there would have been any way, I know you were sick, and that's the only reason we didn't have you come and sit in the studio next to us today, because you have your chemotherapy treatments, and you needed to get home quickly so you wouldn't miss them. But I want to tell you, there's a lot of Christians here who would love you and who wouldn't be afraid to put their arm around you and tell you that we love you and that we care.
Thank you, Tammy. God bless you for saying that. I think that's a very, very important thing.
Steve Peters was a pastor, an openly gay pastor in the 80s. He was also a member of the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles. He actually outlived Tammy Faye. She died in 2007, and he died, I think, last year. He lived long enough to go to the premiere of the Tammy Faye movie with Jessica Chastain. Their friendship was so special, and he really kind of blew the doors down. Here I am, I'm in your living room, you're gonna not even deal with, he's a delight. You're gonna see what this is, and she's gonna call these people out. And I mean, I don't know how Jim felt, probably badly, because Jim Baker sucks, but he let her have this 20-minute space to do this on national television. They were huge. Can you imagine something like that happening today? You wouldn't see something like that unless the person was ex-gay and they were repenting. But it kind of reminds me, throat goat Nancy Reagan, she was all about the just say no to drugs. And the abstinence people were saying just say no to sex. None of them were doing harm reduction. None of them were doing protection. None of them were doing, programs. She's not advocating for, drug rehab programs or prison reform. She's saying, just say no. Kids are smart, and a lot of them have, parents or family members who do drugs. They need a little more help than just say no. Anyway, here's Ronald Reagan talking about sex education in general and his opinions on it in a radio broadcast from 1979. Yes, I know he was not president at that time, but still, it's relevant. Because don't you want to hear him talk about, you don't want to be having sex is like eating a ham sandwich.
Recently, a Los Angeles newspaper editorialized about the increasing birth rate among unwed teenage mothers, calling it a personal disaster for them and their children and a social disaster for the country. The writer then confirmed his opinion by citing statistics developed in a 2-year study by a task force of the House Select Committee on Population. The figures are indeed sobering. 1 million adolescent girls get pregnant each year, and a third of them have abortions. Of the 600,000 who gave birth last year, almost half, 250,000, were under 17 years of age. About 70% of the pregnant girls do not finish high school, and 90% of those under age 15 drop out of school. In 1976, about half of the public funds expended for aid to families with dependent children, $4.6 billion, went to mothers who first gave birth as teenagers. Births among unwed teenagers have more than doubled since 1960, and the rate of births to girls under 15 has increased 33% in the last 10 years. 50% of unwed mothers are in their teens. The editorial went on to support proposals by a member of Congress to increase funds to extend family planning services to more teenagers and for an extension of sex education in our schools. It was pointed out that these proposals could lead to a saving of money because so many of these teenage mothers became dependent on welfare.
Reagan loved complaining about welfare queens, an inaccurate stereotype that he made up to try and disparage poor people who use social services. It's a very racist and dangerous trope.
I've never been against saving tax dollars, but I wonder if our first concern shouldn't be for saving these girls from tragedy which could very well affect their entire lives. I'm not sure that more sex education, as it is presently taught, is the answer. Please note that I said as it is presently taught. I'm sure all of us are aware of the importance of young people knowing, as we used to say, the facts of life. But in our concern lest sex education in the schools violate religious beliefs, have we been teaching sex as a purely physiological function like eating when you're hungry? Can we completely divorce sex education, as I'm afraid we do, from any association with moral behavior without implanting in young minds that it has no more significance than eating a sandwich, so why not? A California scholar has written an essay, Turning Children into Sex Experts. The author says, quote, "The seventh grader in my city is advised to set for himself a purely personal standard of sexual behavior. No religious views, no community moral standards are to deflect him from his overriding purposes of self-discovery, self-assertion, and self-gratification."
So that is really interesting to me, that Reagan was sort of saying that without a religious component, an abstinence education is kind of doesn't do anything. Because he's saying, oh, they want to make it into a personal thing, a personal decision instead of, being a religious decision. Unless I'm interpreting that wrong, but that's what I got from it. Which reminds me of a conversation between Richard Ross, the founder of True Love Waits, and Sean McDowell, who is the son of Josh McDowell from Why Wait. They're talking about the effectiveness of abstinence-only programs that don't have a religious component, and Richard Ross is saying, well, what do you expect? They don't have that guilt of God, basically, because the peer pressure from their friends is not enough. They need that religious component.
The inference was True Love Waits kids in the churches making a Bible-based, God-focused promise must be exactly like all the kids and all the schools and all the programs that have 2 or 3 days of health class and then sign their notebook, assuming that those promises were equal in power. No. Anytime you do research about how have these drug programs done in school, how many kids are living a drug-free lifestyle because of some school program, the numbers are abysmal. And I would say getting teenagers to not have sex because my class at school told me not to have sex, I think that is a weak motivation. And later when hormones are raging and the pressures are building, I'm probably going to slip up.
In 1981, Ronald Reagan passed the Adolescent Family Life Act, also nicknamed the Chastity Act. This empowered the government for the first time in U.S. history to fund abstinence-only advocacy programs, ostensibly to stop the spike in unintended pregnancies as well as to curb the spread of HIV/AIDS. Before he passed this, quality comprehensive sex education public schools was actually trending upward. Like, there was more of it. It was seen as a good thing. And he undid the 20 years of progress in that area just so he could appeal to the new evangelical voting bloc, the Christian right. So shout out Dr. Sarah Mosliner, researcher, lecturer, and author of Virgin Nation, Sexual Purity and American Adolescence, which I'm in the middle of reading. Unfortunately, I just started it the other day, and then I made this episode, so I gotta get in and finish it. In 1981, President Reagan signed into law the Adolescent Family Life Act, which addressed concern for the escalating rates of teenage pregnancy. This bill, sponsored by Senators Orrin Hatch and Jeremiah Denton, was a direct attempt to shift federal funding away from comprehensive sex ed that provided information on contraception, an approach that conservatives like Hatch and Denton believed was responsible for escalating rates of sexual promiscuity, teenage pregnancy, and abortion, which is such a boomer kind of idea, right? If you teach them about sex, then they're going to go out and do it. That's why they don't want to have condoms at schools. By allowing 2/3 of the funding to support already pregnant teenagers, while the other third provided funding for abstinence education, the bill gained support among Democrats who did not share Hatch and Denton's views. In truth, the bill passed as a result of a political deal in which liberals agreed to support the AFLA in exchange for conservative support of funding for family planning clinics. Despite the seemingly conservative bent of the 1980s, the controversy pitting safe sex against abstinence-only education, which would eventually become a hallmark of political discourse, began with a compromise. Still, controversy was quick to follow, and from an unlikely source. In 1983, a group of federal taxpayers, clergymen, and the American Jewish Congress filed the first lawsuit through the American Civil Liberties Union, claiming that the AFLA's funding of religious organizations that promoted abstinence violated the First Amendment's insistence on religious disestablishment. Though the clergy initially won their case, the Supreme Court overturned the ruling in 1988, prompting the ACLU to proceed with its own appeal. Here's some more about that lawsuit, Bowen versus Kendrick. June 29th, 1988, in Bowen versus Kendrick, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in a 5-4 decision that the 1981 Adolescent Family Act, or AFLA, was constitutional. Under AFLA, the U.S. government could distribute federal funding for abstinence-only sexual education programs, oftentimes given to groups with religious affiliations. As a federal taxpayer, Chan Kendrick challenged the constitutionality of AFLA, claiming it violated the separation of church and state. The Supreme Court found that although AFLA funded programs that aligned with certain religious ideologies, it was constitutional because it did not encourage government involvement in religion, and it held a valid secular purpose in seeking to prevent adolescent pregnancy and premarital sexual relations. By upholding AFLA, Bowen versus Kendrick enabled the U.S. government to continue funding abstinence-only education, which researchers have found to be ineffective. From 1981 to 1988, AFLA enabled the government to give more than $100 million to religious organizations, many of which were Roman Catholic charities that used the funding to teach abstinence-only education classes at churches and private schools with religious affiliations. Supreme Court level, the majority decision in Bowen versus Kendrick ruled in favor of Bowen, finding that the AFLA passed the 3-part Establishment Clause test conditions. William H. Rehnquist wrote the majority opinion and was joined by Byron R. White, Antonin Scalia, Sandra Day O'Connor, and Anthony M. Kennedy. Notably, the Supreme Court had a conservative majority at the time of the Bowen versus Kendrick decision. The 5 Supreme Court justices in the majority concurred with the district court assessment that AFLA had a valid secular purpose. However, the Supreme Court majority found that AFLA did not advance religion, which differed from the decision previously held by the district court. The Supreme Court justices in the majority argued that the programs of the religiously affiliated grantees of the AFLA did not impose a substantial risk for religious indoctrination, which is the process of imparting religious doctrine in the authoritative way. Further, they found that the projects that AFLA authorized, such as pregnancy testing, educational services, and adoption counts, were not themselves religious activities, and that they could not be considered religious activities simply because they were carried out by organizations with religious affiliations. Finally, they argued that although government monitoring of AFLA grants was necessary for Bowen to ensure public money was spent appropriately, the limited nature of that monitoring itself did not amount to excessive government involvement with religion. Thus, in 1988, the Supreme Court reversed the district court decision and ruled that AFLA was constitutional. So, yeah, Christian youth groups didn't stand a fucking chance. Not a chance in the world. You got the government behind this shit giving these groups $100 million and over $1 billion since the 80s. Your schools are teaching it to you. You're probably getting it at church. You're probably getting it on TV. Your peers, the people at church, your family, your friends, your family's friends. Hell, even the dog was probably slut-shaming people back then.
First of all, God says, don't commit sexual immorality, not because I want to take the fun out of your life, but I want to protect the most powerful sex organ you have. I want to provide for the most delicate sex organ I created you. I want to protect the most sensitive sex organ you have. Your mind. Fooled you, didn't I?
We're pleased to welcome to Fire by Night one of America's top lecturers and authors. His name is Josh McDowell. Josh, thank you for being with us.
Hey, thanks for letting me be in the clubhouse.
You bet. You're traveling right now in doing the Why Wait campaign and ministry, and I'm sure a lot of people do know about it, but tell us, for those who don't know, a little bit about what Why Wait is all about.
Why Wait is about presenting a positive message about God's perspective of sex and sexuality, why he says to wait. And it's using every method of live conferences, concerts with the great band Petra, which I love to be a part of. And then we just finished a film on the whole issue of AIDS and the age, sex in the age of AIDS, and who do you listen to?
By the way, this is from the show Fire by Night, which is a late-night Christian variety show that was in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was produced by Willie George Ministries. Willie George, of course, is from Church on the Move out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was also Gospel Bill and is in a lot of my Wichita Slim Gospel Bill video. I highly recommend you go watch it. Why Wait, which was a book series, video series, conference thing, movement started by Josh McDowell. Josh McDowell, whatever. You're telling me there's a guy named Dick Day and he's trying to tell kids not to have sex? Josh McDowell, who, problematic, but like you probably could have guessed that. He worked for Campus Crusade for Christ, or crew, as you might know them. This is from his Wikipedia, and it's 100% written by him. Just listen. McDowell's full-time ministry with Campus Crusade for Christ began with his appointment as a campus speaker in Latin America, where he interacted with both Marxist and fascist student groups. Oh, did ya? He subsequently returned to North America, where he became known as an itinerant speaker addressing campus groups about Christian faith. He conducted seminars called Maximum Sex and Why Wait, the famous one. This next section is from a Pathos blog by Chris Gers. Sorry, I think the blog belongs to Chris Gers, and the person writing the post is Jared Burkholder. McDowell's personal story made for a perfect conversion narrative that assured evangelicals that Christian faith was intellectually superior to other worldviews. As his story goes, McDowell had set out to prove Christianity false, and in the process found it so convincing he became a Christian. He went on to sell thousands of copies of popular 1970s apologetics books such as More Than a Carpenter and Evidence That Demands a Verdict, which were all not that original or intellectually sophisticated, but they were just the ticket for busy youth pastors who could hand them to intellectually anxious kids, like myself, to brush aside their doubts. McDowell turned to teaching abstinence around 1987 when he published Why Wait? What You Need to Know About the Teen Sexuality Crisis. Along with this came a book for parents of teenagers called How to Help Your Child Say No to Sexual Pressure. A video series on VHS quickly followed with which youth pastors could show to their youth groups. Then in 1989, McDowell defied anti-rock preachers and linked up with Petra. The Christian rock, popular among teenage guys, was at its zenith in these years.
Saying that in 1 Thessalonians 4, the Apostle Paul talks about living a life pleasing to God and what the will of God is. And it answers a question right there when it says if we want to live a life pleasing to God and we want to know the will of God, then it says abstain from sexual immorality. And immediately, you know, kids will say, and even the parents will say, well, that's so negative, you know, Christianity, don't do this, don't do that. Well, the Why Wait message is that it's positive. And you say, well, how do you get a positive out of negative? Do not, N-O-T, negative. You get it this way. Inherent or within every negative commandment in the Bible, there are two positive principles. One to protect, the other to provide. And when God says in the area of sexuality to wait, he doesn't do it because he's a cosmic killjoy. He does it because he loves us. And he says, because I love you, I want you to wait because the two positive principles. I want to protect you and provide for you. So with Why Wait, it's all incorporated around the protecting and the provision that God has when we wait. And then the other aspect of Why Wait is in when we don't wait, we blow it and just say, well, is it too late for God to love and accept me? Then the second part of Why Wait is a clean heart for a new start. Begin anew by the grace of God and his forgiveness.
Petra worked with Josh McDowell and Why Wait, and they did an abstinence-themed album. Well, who do you listen to? Sex in the Age of AIDS. A public school film every church youth should see. In an age where promiscuity is rampant and a careless sexual encounter can be fatal, here's a powerful media tool that helps your young people make responsible decisions about their sexual behavior. This powerful film essay features dramatic vignettes and the best in contemporary music from Petra and real-life situations out of today's news headlines, which create meaningful discussion when used to launch a program on this important topic. Directed by an award-winning filmmaker from USC and featuring noted author and speaker Josh McDowell, this vital media presentation in the ongoing Why Wait campaign creates a not-to-be-forgotten program when used with young people. This film, primarily intended for presentation in public school settings, is frank while steering young people towards God's plan for their relationships. As the on-camera host narrator states, we have contemporary rock and roll heroes telling us sex is best one-on-one, our ministers telling us sex is best none-on-none, and every medical authority in the country telling us that sexual encounter of any kind has a high potential for contracting a sexually transmitted disease. So, who do you listen to? Practical answers come from a variety of sources, from the humor of the preachers in disguise, PID. Let me look up PID.
I know you're gonna dig this.
Get you a Bible. This is awesome. Also, major shout out to whoever is behind Petrospective.nl. It seems to be a whole website that is documenting the entire discography of Petra. This is the website where I found all this information about this Josh McDowell Petra thing. And they scanned the VHS tape, including the discussion booklets. And I don't know about you, but I really don't want to learn how to be a good lover from Josh McDowell, or figure out a sexual puzzle with psychologist Dick Day. No thank you. Also, oh my god, I didn't see this. They made t-shirts that say, "I'm not doing it." Oh man, and they were only $12 in the 80s. Oh my god, I would love one of those shirts.
Wanna say it loud, wanna say it proud. Hey, I love the Lord. Come on, everybody. All right, come on.
That was a clip of Petra performing, I assume, the song "I Love the Lord," and they were performing at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. in July of 1994 for the big True Love Waits conference, festival, event. I don't know how really to describe it. Over 20,000 young people showed up, and they took their True Love Waits pledge cards and nailed them into the ground.
Washington, D.C. at 7 a.m. The warm wash of morning sun brings the nation's capital to life. But one of the most unusual sights on the National Mall marks this as no ordinary Friday. Thousands of teenagers from all over North America and from every walk of life have a job to do. Today, they're staking a claim for their future and the future of this country. Today, they're pledging their sexual abstinence until marriage. Gather together with your friends and family as the Inspirational Network and Youth for Christ present True Love Waits, the national celebration, live from the National Mall in Washington, D.C.
Well, now, if the question is why wait, the answer is resoundingly clear. First, it is simply what's morally right. God has ordained sex for marriage.
Believing that true love waits, I make a commitment to God, myself, my family, those I date, my future mate, and the future children to be sexually pure until the day I enter a covenant marriage relationship. And that's just what we believe.
True Love Waits was founded in 1993 by a Southern Baptist youth minister, Richard Ross. He worked for Lifeway at the time. He probably still works for Lifeway because they are the people behind True Love Waits. They even have True Love Project. I know, it's a whole thing. But anyway, in the 90s, he started True Love Waits. He really liked the name. He said it kept coming to him. And he thought that it would get the young people excited because it was more of a positive message.
And I noticed on a legal pad that was in my lap while we were discussing and talking, I was just randomly writing these 3 words over and over: True Love Waits, True Love Waits. And finally, I just sort of came to my senses and I thought, well, why am I writing those words? You know, they say something interesting. It's positive and not negative. It's something that might appeal to young people. There's a challenge there. So I just said to the team, I just wonder, do these 3 words sum up what we're trying to say, what the whiteboards are covered with? And the group leaned back and said, you know, this might be something, this is interesting. Well, you know, here we are, adults trying to imagine how teenagers think and feel. So the decision was quickly made. Hey, Richard, why don't you go to your student group and just talk with them about this? And that's exactly what I did. I said to my students almost immediately, you know, lots of people are coming out of the closet these days. What would it be like if you sort of came out of the closet for what you believe, what you hold dear? What if you kind of went public related to this way of living, this pure way of living that most of you are intrigued with? And the young people said, well, that's certainly interesting. You mean like be willing to talk about that and let people know what you've done? And I said, yeah, it'd be kind of like just being public about it. And the young people were immediately thrilled with the idea. And we began talking about, okay, what if you were to make some kind of a promise? What if there was this moment where you took all the Bible teaching, everything you'd been through, and you took all of that into your heart, and you said, based on all that I know about Jesus, all I know about Scripture, this is what I want. I think I would make a promise in that. So we began talking about that. Of course, I'm going back and forth to Lifeway. The team is saying, oh, a promise? Yes, of course. And we began to figure out what would the words of the promise be. Actually, very quickly after that, 53 young people in my youth group said, let's have a ceremony, for the church.
Wow.
That ceremony, why don't we literally become public about this way of living and let our families, our parents know that we're making this promise? So we had a worship service. It was one of the most memorable worship services of my life. The moms and dads cried. They were so proud.
Wow.
It was a precious time.
Yeah, that was Richard Ross, not to be confused with Rick Ross, being interviewed by Sean McDowell, who is the son of Josh McDowell from Why Wait. And it appears that he's just like his dear old dad. He interviews people like Rosaria Butterfield, so let's not get too excited. Anyway, in the interview I just played for you, Richard Ross was telling the story of the first ever True Love Waits meeting, which was teens at the youth group at his church making a abstinence pledge and generally getting excited about it and kind of making it their own. True Love Waits was officially a part of the Southern Baptist Convention, although in practicality, any denomination could work with them. The more virgins, the better. Here is a vintage video clip of Richard Ross at the 1994 True Love Waits event at the National Mall.
It's an easy decision. I would say to teenagers, the most important thing you've heard tonight is that God loves you. He wants you to have the fullest, happiest life possible. Doesn't it make sense? If God made you, doesn't He know best how to make you truly happy? As an expression of God's love for you, He has decreed that all sex outside of marriage is wrong.
So I came across this documentary on YouTube, and so I'm not sure what the original name of the documentary was, but when I saw it, it was called Teens Waiting for Marriage, the True Love Waits Movement Abstinence Documentary on a YouTube channel called Real Stories. I came across 2 clips from this thing that absolutely shocked me to my core.
My stepmom started when she first married my dad. I mean, I had these sexual thoughts about her. She wore like clothes a teenager would wear and stuff. And my stepsister, I mean, I don't have feelings at all for my other sisters or my mom or anything. But it's like it's like the one I'm not related to. I mean, not blood related to, that's just kind of got me feeling, and I kind of feel like home should be more of a refuge and be able to relax and stay away from that stuff, yet I'm bombarded with it even there.
I really, truly hope that guy got help for his problem, and I am shocked that this was allowed to air, and I want to draw attention to what he was talking about, which was the idea of his family members, his stepmom and his stepsister, dressing probably normally, but to him, he considered that immodest and it was causing him to stumble. Except for he didn't blame it on his own behavior of being a creep, he blamed it on his female family members to try and dress more modestly so he wouldn't have a problem. And it's stuff like that that really contributes to purity culture being akin to rape culture. And the next clip I'm going to play for you is really going to drive that home.
Going to church doesn't make you a Christian anymore, and going to Pizza Hut makes you a pizza.
So what? What's that supposed to mean?
You're not a Christian.
Yes, I am.
If you were a Christian, your heart would not be this hard towards people that love you and towards counsel like this. Your heart is so hard. I have a hard time believing you're a Christian.
Well?
I say it's a church game and you don't know Jesus, and that's a far more serious problem than just what she's talking about. Although you are going to lose your virginity and you are probably going to get date raped and you probably are going to get trashed. God hates the crowd that you're running with. God hates what you're doing. God hates it that your heart is so hard towards Him.
I don't know anything about this Dawson McAllister guy. I don't know if any of you have ever listened to his show. I don't know if he still has a job, but if I ever see him, it's on site. I can't fucking believe that he said such horrible shit on the radio and then it made it into this documentary and he was still allowed to just exist. Like, that is the most horrific, victim blaming, disgusting, sexist, patriarchal bullshit I've ever heard. And I'm honestly like still kind of shocked that I heard that with my own 2 ears. Oh, he died. I guess that is a mission accomplished. You make me sick. All right. Speaking of creeps from the 90s, it's time to talk about the Clinton administration.
We've got to ask our community leaders and all kinds of organizations to help us stop our most serious social problem, the epidemic of teen pregnancies and births where there is no marriage. I have sent to Congress a plan to target schools all over this country with anti-pregnancy programs that work. But government can only do so much. Tonight, I call on parents and leaders all across this country to join together in a national campaign against teen pregnancy to make a difference. We can do this, and we must.
Do you guys remember the AFLA, the Adolescent Family Life Act? Jumping back into Sarah Mosliner's book, in 1993, an out-of-court settlement determined that religious organizations that received funding for abstinence education must abide by the following stipulations. Abstinence education must not include religious references, must be medically accurate, must respect the principle of self-determination regarding contraceptive referral for teenagers, and must not allow grantees to use church sanctuaries for their programs or to give presentations in parochial schools during school hours. Kind of lines up with what I went through. It was definitely abstinence only, wait till you're married to have sex, and they didn't talk about God, but it's kind of implied. In what other context would that be required?
As you know, my father kind of spearheaded the Why Wait campaign, which came before this in probably early to mid 80s for about a decade. And that was a response to certain things that were happening culturally coming out of the sexual revolution. What was it about 1993? And by the way, I was a junior in high school, so I remember that moment well. What do you think it was about that time that motivated this response from students to kind of rise up this way?
Well, this is ancient history now. You know, we can't really identify with what people were thinking, but this was that period where AIDS, AIDS were a big deal. And because of that, the culture was responding to that by, oh my goodness, we've got to protect these kids or they're going to die. And so in the public schools, the teachers have all got bananas in condoms, and we know how all of that went. Okay, the young people that love Jesus were a part of that. You know, that people were continually telling them, hey, we know you're going to live like barnyard animals. It's terrible, but here's some things you can do to protect yourself. That was the consistent message. In fact, the Surgeon General of the United States, bless her heart, she was teaching young people outer course ways to gratify each other in a way that you don't catch a disease. In fact, she was so problematic, Bill Clinton had to set her aside.
All right, Rick Ross, the abstinence elf over here, is trying to tell the, yes, true story of Bill Clinton firing the Surgeon General. And I'm going to tell you that story, but first, I want everyone to put some fucking respect on Dr. Joycelyn Elder's name, because she is a national treasure. From 1993 to 1994, Bill Clinton's administration appointed Dr. Joycelyn Elders, who is the Surgeon General and who was actually very progressive, very well-spoken. She was an icon. Dr. Elders was known for being direct and practical in her approach to confronting teen pregnancy and sex education, serving as a force of reason in a government that was otherwise determined to cede more and more ground on the issue to the conservative right with every passing day. Here she is speaking at World AIDS Day. She gives the person asking her questions way too much grace, because this guy is just making a fool out of himself.
My question is for Dr. Elders. It seems to me that the campaign against AIDS has already destroyed many taboos about discussion of sex in public. It seems to me that there still remains a taboo against discussion about masturbation. And please forgive me for trying to do my tiny bit by announcing that I masturbate. And I do want to ask you, what do you think are the prospects of a more explicit discussion and promotion of masturbation?
Dr. Clark, I think you already know that I'm a very strong advocate of a comprehensive health education program, if you will, starting at a very early age. I feel that it should be age appropriate, it should be complete, and we need to teach our children all of the things that they need to know. And we know that many of our parents have difficulties teaching certain things, and for that reason, to make sure that all of our children were informed, I've always felt that we should make it a part of our school. I feel it's the only institution that we have where all of the children go. And presently, in our schools, it's very incomplete, it's very spotty, and only 5% of schools have a comprehensive program. To address your specific question in regard to masturbation, I think that is something that it's a part of human sexuality, and it is a part of something that perhaps should be taught, but we've not even taught our children the very basics. And I feel that we have tried ignorance for a very long time, and it's time we try education.
Pretty reasonable, right? Like, I think we can all agree that sex education in America sucks, and it's okay to masturbate. Well, that was too controversial for Americans in 1994, and Bill Clinton forced Dr. Elders to resign, aka she was fired. Here she is on the Today Show, speaking her piece.
Surgeon General Joycelyn Elders. On Friday, she was forced to resign because of comments she made about masturbation. This morning, she's in our Washington bureau. Dr. Elders, good morning to you.
Good morning, Katie.
After giving a speech at a World AIDS Day event, you were essentially asked about the prospect for a more explicit discussion of masturbation within the dialogue about preventing AIDS. What exactly did you say?
Oh, Katie, I can't ever remember exactly what I've said, but I think it's been on every TV and in every newspaper, and I think I was really talking about teaching children about, that nothing terrible will happen to them if they, play with themselves or things like that. I'm not, I was talking about information.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think your comments were so misunderstood and misinterpreted?
Well, I think that when people are, looking for comments to be misunderstood, and anytime we talk about sexuality issues, I think everybody takes on a different context.
When you heard the White House, specifically President Clinton, Dr. Elders, was asking for your resignation following those comments, were you surprised?
Well, yes.
Were you angry?
No. I feel that the president has to do what the president has to do or feel he needs to do, at a given time. And I feel that, that's what being president is about.
Conservatives, as you well know, have been after you ever since you were appointed to the position of Surgeon General. Do you feel as if Bill Clinton was somehow bowing to political pressure by asking you to resign from your post?
Well, I feel that the president, again, was doing the things that he felt he needed to do, taking all things into consideration. And I feel, again, that's what he's supposed to do each and every day, show leadership. And a part of that was his feeling that I needed to resign or not continue to be Surgeon General at this time. I feel that that's what he should do.
Newt Gingrich recently made some disparaging remarks about you, but some of your remarks were controversial by any standards. Even your supporters have suggested, Dr. Elders, that your candor really didn't help you or the administration very much. For example, in the Washington Post, an editorial praised your accomplishments, but added, quote, "She just wouldn't stop popping off in heedless fashion, almost if she were looking for trouble."
Does that kind of read as a little racist to anybody else? Because it kind of set off some red flags for me.
Do you wish in retrospect that you had tempered some of the comments you've made in the past?
Oh, Katie, it's, when you look back, you can, hindsight's 20/20. And I think that Joycelyn Elders was Joycelyn Elders. And so, I really felt that all of the comments I made were true. And, I think that the country needs to approach many of these issues And the longer we wait, I feel the more children we're going to lose. And yeah, I don't feel that, I should start second-guessing myself today.
Do you think, though, Dr. Elders, that perhaps that you were out of touch with mainstream America? Some of your comments about looking into legalizing drugs, being dismissive to those who didn't want to have condom distribution in schools, saying that those who were against abortion needed to get over their love affair with the fetus.
I think that all of those comments need to be taken into the context in which they were approached. I was asked about legalization of drugs, and I said that I felt that we should study the issue, considering the number of young people that we were having that was dying with drugs, considering the number of crimes that we have in our society, and the marked cost to our society. So that was, and I said that I didn't know. And if I knew the answer, I wouldn't have felt we needed to study the issue. And study to me means looking at what is the best way. We know that just picking people up and throwing them in jail is not necessarily the way to solve that problem.
Dr. Elders is still alive, and she is still kicking ass. After she resigned, she returned to the University of Arkansas for medical sciences as a professor of pediatrics and is currently professor emerita at UAMS. She's a regular on the speaking circuit, and she's worked with all kinds of different people debunking myths about sex education and abstinence only, which she is not a fan of. She was inducted into the Arkansas Women's Hall of Fame in 2016. In 2015, Philander Smith College, Elders' alma mater, established the Dr. Joycelyn Elders School of Allied and Public Health. In October of 2010, she voiced her support for legalizing marijuana. She's just all around amazing, and I'm glad I got to talk about her today. In contrast, Bill Clinton was courting the conservatives again, and he managed to free up $250 million in the budget for abstinence-only sex education. This was in 1997, and by then, pretty much everyone knew that these abstinence-only programs don't help, and they actively make it worse.
We know that from teenage pregnancy studies, that the most successful studies are not the ones that just teach the kids about abstinence or sex education, but give them something positive to do. Our Girl Power campaign, for example, which gives young women something positive about themselves, strengthens them on the inside, gives them positive things. A new patch the Girl Scouts is doing, the Boys and Girls Clubs and their roles. Again, the adults that interact with young people and making sure that they're trained not only to do things and to work with young people, but to listen to them.
That was Donna Shalala. Besides having a fun name to say, she was the Health and Human Services Secretary in 1999. From a conference of the National Ad Council, and funny enough, we're going to talk about them a little bit later in the episode, but for now, I wanted to talk about the program that she was talking about that was called Girl Power, which was an education initiative that included a comprehensive program focused on building wellness in American girls aged 9 to 14. We had to go deep into the Wayback Machine for this one. This link is over 25 years old, and this is probably the only time I've ever seen mention of this Girl Power program. But this program covered such topics as eating disorders, self-esteem, mental health, and generally tried to present itself as being much more than just a pregnancy program, as we heard Donna Shalala saying. Did you catch that she didn't talk about abstinence? She talked about teen pregnancy, but she didn't talk about what the actual policy of the Clinton administration was, which was abstinence only. I can't find when the Girl Power program officially ended, but seeing as how George W. Bush would be elected in 2000, he probably got rid of it or didn't set it up to renew. As early as 1996 and then again in 1998, on the website of the Clinton administration, you can see them talking about abstinence only. Also in the 90s, there was a phenomenon of courtship, which was not invented by, but sure as fuck was popularized by Joshua Harris. He wrote I Kissed Dating Goodbye, and there's also, he wrote other books too. He has since deconstructed and gotten divorced, and I don't think he considers himself Christian. He also wrote a course about how to deconstruct. And if you had been affected by his books, he would give you like a free copy of it. And after the backlash of that, after people were like, you're going to take our money twice after what you did. And so he took that course down, and he's since apologized for that. But yeah, I Kissed Dating Goodbye popularized the courtship model, the knight in shining armor, the pieces, giving away pieces of your heart, the no kissing until marriage thing. And I don't see it brought up a lot when people talk about like abstinence only education and purity culture, because I think it's a little more niche. At the time of his public deconstruction and apology for the damage that I Kissed Dating Goodbye gave to a whole generation of purity culture participants, conservative Christians at the time were pissed. There was just limitless think pieces about how Josh Harris was an apostate and he was going to bring down the fall of civilization, including some choice commentary from Girl Defined.
Yeah, this isn't working for me.
Yeah.
I think that's a direct result of what happens when we elevate a person
Right.
or a method as like the God and saying this is the answer, and when it fails us, we're like, what happened? And then we kind of ditch the whole baby with the bathwater and say, well, that didn't work for me, so I'm going to try something else. When really the problem may have been, yes, some of that was wrong, but we shouldn't have been looking to that solely and completely for all of our answers.
I've seen this Girl Defined video a couple of times, and it's a whole lot of rambling and yapping and nothing, basically. But Bethy does mention several times that there are biblical truths that could be taken from some of the aspects of purity culture. You know, probably talking about the no sex before marriage and the sexual brokenness, but to feel comfortable throwing away things that are bad about the movement. I mean, she didn't say that. I interpreted that because she's not very good at communicating, but they were not fans of Josh Harris, and they are not empathetic towards anyone who was ever harmed by purity culture because they can't think about anybody but themselves for more than 2 minutes.
We share our experience. So we actually created a video on this YouTube channel called
Why I Kissed Dating Goodbye didn't ruin our lives.
So we posted that video just sharing our story and why this book that had seemed to ruin so many people's lives didn't ruin our lives, and why we were still doing okay.
I always hated that, the way she did quotations when she said ruin. Like, you don't believe that these people's lives were ruined, or you think they're being dramatic, because you could never comprehend being in someone else's shoes and being hurt by religion. Girl Defined, Paul and Morgan, countless others. Honestly, with the internet being as big as it is now, there's just an unlimited number of purity culture peddlers, and there's no way I can cover them all.
They like purity culture, blah, 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 and then they see us talking about how awesome sex should be within marriage.
And while I'm on the subject of modern purity peddlers like Girl Defined, I just wanted to say that I am aware of Bethy and Deconstruction Gate. I want you to know that I see everything, and I am plotting and scheming, and I would like to hold off and wait, just like Abstinence, to make a really good video that is going to take a lot of work and care and love will be put into it. So just remember, good things are worth the wait. So now we're going to enter the Bush era, and this is one that I have a lot of history with. I started going to school in 1989. I just want to say that, like, I was on the border of all this stuff. I had Christian friends and friends who went to church, and, like, I went to this, like, cool youth hangout place downtown that was Christian themed, and they had, you know, Guitar Hero, and, like, Christian bands would play, and they had a half pipe downstairs, and
Praise him!
where they had like Dance Dance Revolution, or a knockoff at least, and it was super fun. I would go all the time, and then one day they had enough and they sat us all down in the concert area, and they said, okay, well, actually we're Christian and y'all are gonna have to listen to us give a sermon before you're allowed to play Guitar Hero. And the vibes were off after that.
Can't you see you're not making Christianity better? You're just making rock and roll worse.
It's crazy how much stuff I knew and didn't realize I knew. Like, I really liked Flyleaf as a teenager, and I didn't know that they were Christian And now I know that they were very Christian, and when I listen to the lyrics, it's all I can hear. And, you know, please go watch VBSR3. That's the episode where I talk about the 2000s and Christian emo and stuff. I talk a lot more about Lacey Sturm. I talk about the direction she's gone, because she's not exactly an ally. Yeah, the 2000s were crazy. Are you kidding me? It was iconic. Like, not in a good way. It was kind of flop tropica, if I'm being honest. The 2000s... I mean, besides 9/11, we had the hyper-nationalism, the hyper-patriotism, purity balls, the She Said Yes movement, where you're telling all these teenage kids they need to be prepared to die, and they need to be prepared to say yes if a shooter asks them if they believe in God. You had, like, rapture, craziness, everybody was obsessed with the rapture and Left Behind. Good stuff, too, like, of course, Christian rock, Christian emo, Christian metal, all the Christian skateboarders. Like, if I had known the fucked up shit they were doing to you guys at church, I would not have thought that was fun. I would not have thought that was quaint. Do you all remember the ad from the beginning of the video? The one with the dad who wanted to block all sex from his daughter's mind? Okay, well, that was an ad from the Advertisement Council, also known as the Ad Council. They were formed in 1942 to advertise war bonds. The Ad Council is an American nonprofit organization that produces, distributes, and promotes public service announcements on behalf of various sponsors, including nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations, and agencies of the United States government. The Ad Council partners with advertising agencies that work pro bono to create the public service advertisements on behalf of their campaigns. The organization accepts requests from sponsor institutions for advertising campaigns that focus on particular social issues. To qualify, an issue must be non-denominational, nonpartisan, though not necessarily unbiased, have national relevance, and be an issue for which communications can make measurable difference. The Ad Council had some pretty famous ad campaigns, including this one featuring a Native American man crying about littering, McGruff the crime dog teaching kids about not talking to strangers, Smokey the bear and his hatred of forest fires, Vince and Larry crash test dummies, and interestingly enough, PSAs about the prevention of the spread of HIV, where they advertised viewers to use condoms.
You might think people with the AIDS virus look sick, but most don't. It can be years before the symptoms show up. So if you have sex, don't take any more chances than you have to. Use a condom, because you can get AIDS from someone who looks perfectly healthy. That's how I got it.
January of 2009, the Ad Council released a set of PSAs called Gadget, where a father ponders about a special sex-blocking gadget for his daughter's mind, only to be told by the omniscient narrator to talk to your kids about sex. It's not a bad message at all, but unfortunately, many parents don't talk to their kids about sex, and so the kids rely on information taught to them at school, and, well, you know how that went. I don't hate these commercials. I just find them kind of funny, especially since James and I hunted down this clip from the Ad Council on the Wayback Machine and found two other versions of this PSA. That's right. Depending on demographics and the channel you are watching, you might see the Gadget ad, or you might have gotten the Gadget ad for African American audiences.
I'm good at controlling what my son's exposed to, but sex is everywhere. I wish they make, like, sex blocking equipment so I could monitor everything he sees and hears. There's so much sex on TV. And the music these days, I just wish there was a better way to shield him from it. 'Cause he's not ready to think about that stuff.
You can't control your kids' exposure to sex, but you can influence how they behave. So talk to them. Tell them you want them to wait to have sex.
Does anyone else think that if such a gadget did exist, that fundamentalists would absolutely buy one? But anyway, this is America, and we do have a high percentage of people who speak Spanish, so they made a Spanish version of this ad, and I don't think I need to translate it for you because you probably have the English version memorized at this point.
Yo soy buena para controlar lo que está expuesta mi hija, pero el sexo está en todas partes. Si tan solo hicieran como equipos para bloquear el sexo, para poder monitorear todo lo que ve y oye. Hay tanto sexo en la tele y la música hoy en día. Me gustaría que hubiera una manera mejor de protegerla, porque no está lista para pensar en esas cosas.
No puede controlar a cuánto sexo están expuestos sus hijos.
Pero sí puede tener influencia en su comportamiento.
Así que hábleles.
Dígales que quiere que esperen para tener sexo.
What other weird shit was the government doing in the 2000s? Let's talk about it. By now, most people know that conservative evangelical Christians were the ones who put George W. Bush into the White House in 2000. And in turn, they would be expecting a lot of favors. And interestingly enough, it seems that in regards to sex education particularly, Congress itself paved the way for a lot of George W. Bush's later action in that regard. Specifically in 2000, at the tail end of Clinton's term, Congress created the Community-Based Abstinence Education Program, or CBAE. Under Title 11 of Social Security, CBAE allowed the federal government to fully bypass state-level decision makers and instead just directly granted funding for abstinence-only programs directly to American school districts. It makes total sense why it was pushed so hard. In turn, utilizing the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives he founded in January 2001, George W. Bush would then exploit the hell out of CBAE by distributing millions of dollars to religious abstinence-only programs to be deployed in public and private educational settings alike. He also did something similar to faith-based drug rehabilitation programs, which is a whole other thing. And please note that all of this groundwork was laid well before 9/11, meaning it was clearly part of George W. Bush's agenda going into office. While that particular tragedy would end up making his approach to governance even more uncomfortably religious, it's clear that the sex thing was on his mind well before that. In 2006, he sought to add an additional $270 million for his abstinence-only programs, despite the fact that by the time their failure was more than well known. Going even further by encouraging people in their 20s to also stay celibate until marriage. He also famously tried to, add it to the Constitution that marriage is between a man and a woman, and that was a whole other fucking ordeal at the time, so... The trenches, I swear.
Laura and I send greetings to everyone attending the Abstinence Clearinghouse 2004 conference.
Abstinence Clearinghouse was founded by Leslie Unruh, who is an American anti-abortion advocate and public speaker, according to Wikipedia. In 1996, she founded the National Abstinence Clearinghouse, a nonprofit based in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The Clearinghouse serves as a resource center, providing information on abstinence until marriage programs. The organization grew rapidly after a federal government grant of $50 million for abstinence programs split between organizations. Its first conference was organized in 1998 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So, yeah, 1998, that means that was paid for by Bill Clinton. Although George Bush was a fan and appeared to be addressing the Abstinence Clearinghouse conference specifically. Like maybe he recorded that video for them to say hi. That little hi from George Bush.
Through events designed for parents and their children like Purity Ball, Night to Remember, God, Mom, and Me Tea, and Father-Son Time Out.
I also did go to her website and saw all the other things that she has founded, including several maternity homes and very clearly Christian-based organizations, such as Virtrue, which empowers men and women to have fruitful conversations and helps guide decisions grounded in biblical truth, as well as a chiropractic clinic, which is not, that doesn't surprise me. I'm pretty sure the chiropractic clinic is for her husband, who is a chiropractor. Truth for Youth, an abstinence education program that offered classes at many schools throughout the country. It doesn't say anything about religion, and I think that's how these abstinence programs were allowed in schools, but it's all very Christian coded, and it's obvious to anybody who thinks about it for more than 2 seconds. Since Leslie is a pro-life activist, it appears that she is politically active. Here she is at the Council for National Policy, and here she is with Kevin Sorbo. So, yeah, she must really like Xena.
We applaud you for helping young people make the healthy and courageous decision to choose abstinence. Choosing abstinence requires character, self-restraint, and self-respect. Through your educational programs, you reach out to countless young people and give them the support they need to make that responsible choice. Every day in America, at least 10,000 teens become infected with sexually transmitted diseases that can harm them or prevent them from ever becoming parents. Abstinence is the only certain way to avoid these diseases. That is why I have proposed a new grassroots campaign to inform teens and parents about these medical risks. My budget would also double federal funding for abstinence-only programs in schools and communities. We are developing best practices for effective abstinence programs and reviewing programs across the federal government to ensure we are sending consistent messages to America's teens. Working together, all of us can help send the right messages to our young people and make a real difference in their lives. I thank you for your commitment to this important cause. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
I think now is as good a time as any to talk about purity balls because, you know, they make your balls pure.
We decide tonight that we will pour into the hearts of our daughters. We will be the standard for their lives and all their future men. Fathers, will you stand with me? Will you stand together in this accord? Let's take those covenants in the middle of your table. I choose before God to cover my daughter as her authority and protection in the area of purity. I will lead, guide, and pray over my daughters as the high priest in my home. There's a pen in the middle of your paper. Pick that up and sign that. And then have your daughters witness that.
It says on the document, as the high priest in my home. What's that mean?
There is a hierarchy of levels of authority, and we believe in the home. The father sits at that place.
I think that there are moments in life that need to be extravagant. This celebrates the strength of a father, his love for the daughter, and it creates one of those moments that she will never have again. This is the night that she will always have with her daddy.
I wonder if there aren't kids who, for one reason or another, couldn't live up to the expectations that you have for your children. What happens to them? They feel they've failed in this purity journey.
All life is about redemption. We all mess up, misstep, make mistakes that are bigger than others. But it's all about getting back up and going after it again.
So you wouldn't disown one of your kids if someone came home?
Oh my goodness, absolutely not. Oh, absolutely not. I think the best thing we can do is to gather up and walk with.
These kind of started in the 90s and went into the 2000s, like some other things that we're going to be talking about today. But purity balls, I know. Why even say balls? But it's funny. Don't put ball in the name of something if you're going to be talking about teen purity. And expect me not to laugh. It's like writing a book about abstinence and having a name like Dick Day. According to everything I've read, there have been purity balls in at least 48 states. I don't know of any purity balls, maybe in Alaska or Hawaii, but I wouldn't be shocked if they have them. I believe that the most popular and the most famous one was invented by Randy Wilson and his wife Lisa Wilson in 1998 out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. Current Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, shout out James, he has an amazing episode about him. Recently, footage of him taking his daughter to a purity ball was found, and this was on a German TV show, so that's probably why nobody noticed it up until now, but I couldn't find any footage of this on any American news sites. They had screenshots of the back of his head, but nobody seems to have the actual footage, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Johnson had it scrubbed from the internet as best as he could. If you're thinking, wow, taking your daughter to a purity ball, having her pledge her virginity to you, but don't worry. Mike Johnson is also creepy about his son's sexual purity because he famously uses covenant eyes. And would you be surprised that this strange and troubling father-daughter boundary problem exists in a situation like a purity ball?
I want one husband and one husband alone, and I want to have a successful marriage. And so I feel like if you date in high school, it's just setting you up for a divorce or practicing divorce.
I had so many friends. They were talking to me like, oh, Caroline, do you have a boyfriend? We all do and everything. Like, we should like double date or something. It's like, I don't need a boyfriend. Yeah.
It's your dad.
Yeah.
This creepy motherfucker was given multiple chances during this interview to clarify what he meant by the insistence that he is his daughter's boyfriend, and he just kept doubling down. He's like, no, I'm her boyfriend.
I don't need a boyfriend because I have my dad that's already filled by a man.
And Jesus.
Yeah, and Jesus.
You talk about yourself as your daughter's boyfriend. That's going to have a lot of people, make an awful lot of people uncomfortable. It's way too Freudian. How do you...
See, this is what I find absolutely humorous in our culture today, where something as pure as a daddy going out with his daughter on a date is twisted to make it seem like, as you mentioned, Freudian. I wasn't thinking about Freud at all. I was thinking about having a great time with my daughter. You know, I encourage my daughters to come sit on my lap. We snuggle, we sit by the fireplace. There's absolutely nothing sexual in that whole experience.
Yeah, dude, but that still doesn't stop you from being a fucking grade A creep. Like, I'm not going to say it or accuse anybody of committing any crimes, but if you think about a lot of the abuse that happens in these fundamentalist, hyper-patriarchal circles, it's not exactly good optics to be joking around or be serious about calling yourself your daughter's boyfriend. That is fucked up, point blank.
Meanwhile, Ron has a special gift for Caroline before they all head to the ball.
I'm ready for you, dear. You look lovely. Well, you are growing up before your daddy's eyes. One of the things that you were talking to Daddy about was, when am I going to get my purity ring? And one of the things that I think is important for us to remember is this is your desire to do it the Lord's way, to really save yourself from kissing lots of toads along the way and wait for your Prince Charming to come along. And he's got to pass through your dad. And Dad's got to put the stamp of approval on him, because dads are really smart and they can separate princes from toads really well. Let me show you the ring that I got for you here. And when somebody comes along who is ready and has the proper character and will treat you like a queen, then that's the guy that passes the test. And until then, this is just a reminder. Keeping yourself pure is important. And so you keep that on your finger, and it's a daily reminder that at this point, you're married to the Lord, and your father is your boyfriend. And we're gonna have fun together. And let me go ahead and give you that. Get ready to dance the night away.
Well, that sure was weird and creepy. You know what else was kind of creepy and weird in the 2000s? Silver ring thing.
If you have a sexually active teenager right now, you have a big problem. 30 years of teaching safe sex. We now have 65 million Americans living with a sexually transmitted disease.
Mom, Dad, talk to me.
I would think you'd freak out if you knew that. So you're not freaking out, but maybe you will start to.
The Silver Ring thing is clearly the best mix of high-tech sound, lighting, special effects, and comedy performance about guys, girls, dating, love, second chances, and choices.
The ring is a constant reminder of your husband or your wife. And that could have been me, who would have been a father at 50 years old.
Silver Ring thing, which was another abstinence program that was paid for by the federal government. And it was so peak rebellious, hot topic Christian. They had concerts and skits and lasers, and they did parodies of popular movies like Austin Powers and Lord of the Rings. And they presented participants with these purity rings. Sometimes purity rings are also called promise rings, and some of them were literally adorned with different things like Bible verses or sayings like true love waits or something like that. Some purity rings are cute, like they have a heart on them, and other is just a plain silver band. And some people even save their purity rings and melt them down for their wedding rings. Allegedly, according to Richard Ross. If you ever did that, You gotta tell me in the comments. You have to tell me if you did that. I need to know.
So you're designed to have sex with one person, your husband or your wife. This is what the world is doing to you. To you teenagers. Telling you there's such a thing as safe sex. You can have sex. You'll be protected. You won't get diseases. It won't hurt your future. Look at the results.
Silver Ring Thing is now coming to you, to your home, to your classroom. Now you and your friends can be affected by something that has already affected tens of thousands of people. One number, one opportunity can change your life. What will your number be?
Silver Ring Thing was started in the 90s by Denny Patton, and originally they were based out of Arizona, and they were trying to combat the high rates of teen pregnancy. Well, what do you do when you got high rates of teen pregnancy? You don't teach them how to use protection, obviously. So they invented Silver Ring Thing, and they got these really cheap rings, and so they put 2 and 2 together and decided to go with that.
Hi, I'm Denny Patton, and this is the Silver Ring Thing, a sexual abstinence program that really works. Back in 1995, I began to realize that children of America, kids just like these, are in trouble, and it's up to adults like us to do something about it. What I saw was a generation of kids who were living in a moralless society and were being told that casual sex was just another way to feel better about themselves.
Oral sex happens everywhere. Kids started having oral sex when I was in 5th grade.
He likes oral sex, and I like giving the oral sex. I don't think that it's a bad thing.
There's girls that I know that have given oral sex to 7 guys in one night.
I think a lot of parents are being fooled by their kids.
And that's how the Silver Ring Thing was born. Sure, it's a sexual abstinence program, and yes, we really do mean abstinence. We really do mean purity. No sex until you're married, and no fooling around. That's our message. The message is really simple. The secret is in the presentation.
I love the show and the team that performed.
Silver Ring Thing touched my heart tremendously.
The Silver Ring Thing was fun and interesting. It really made you think about life's important decisions.
The program that started in Arizona in 1995 is now a national phenomenon. We're getting ready to saturate the nation with a whole new generation of teens. Teens who wear the silver ring and who have made a commitment to God, to others, and to themselves to remain sexually abstinent and seek purity until they are married. The Silver Ring Thing is not just a show or a one-time event. It's an opportunity to change the world that our children will one day inherit.
Denny Patton passed away in 2001, and Silver Ring Thing became Unaltered Ministries. It does the same exact stuff, and the CEO of that is Jason Burt. No matter how you rebrand Silver Ring Thing, you can't deny how influential purity rings in general and abstinence pledges were in the 2000s. So much so that it was a part of the greater culture, including Disney Channel stars.
My question for the Jonas Brothers is, did it feel so good taking off your purity ring?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude!
You might remember Miley Cyrus and Nick Jonas actually dated from June 2006 to December 2007 and inspired Miley's 7 Things. The 7 things I hate about you. Now back to those infamous purity rings.
Where's your ring?
We don't necessarily like to talk about the purity ring.
There is a lot of content about the Disney purity ring phenomenon that goes into way more depth than I am going to be able to do today. I highly recommend Ashley Norton's video on the same subject. She even has footage that I couldn't seem to find, so I really appreciate that, and check her out. In the late 2000s to 2010s, many Disney Channel stars rocked purity rings, like the Jonas Brothers, Miley Cyrus, Demi Lovato, and Selena Gomez.
Alika wants to know, do you have a purity ring? I do. She wants to know if that's my purity ring. Yes, it is. And another person asked what it says. It says that true love waits. Yes, and I have a necklace that says true love waits, too. We're big believers in that.
And this phenomenon of Disney Channel stars wearing purity rings was so prevalent that it was even made fun of on Mad TV and South Park.
You have to wear the purity rings because that's how we can sell sex to little girls.
But the truth is, being a Disney Channel virgin was not exclusive to just that generation of Disney stars.
That you hope that you'll remain a virgin until you get married.
Yeah, my mom always told me, once you have sex with a guy that, you're with or whatever, it's like so many more emotions are involved and everything gets like, crazy and twisted.
That's what Brittany told me last August. 9 months later, Us Weekly's Todd Gold posed the same question. And she said, quote, I want to wait to have sex until I'm married. I do. I want to wait.
Britney Spears famously dealt with a constant barrage of invasive and disrespectful questions about her sex life.
I'm just wondering how you feel about all the constant speculation about your virginity and whether you are a virgin or not.
I really wish I would have never said anything to begin with, because I'm kind of stuck in this little place where people are always asking me. But, you know, that's just something that's part of growing up, and that's just something that we all have to deal with, so.
Have there been any changes on that front?
That's a personal question.
Justin Timberlake was dating Britney at the time of these questions, but curious enough, he was not subjected to the same standard of purity as she was.
Singer Jessica Simpson, a star's rare and revealing interview about why she's chosen to remain a virgin.
I'm a hopeless romantic.
And the boyfriend who broke up with her because of her decision.
That's next on Entertainment Tonight.
Jessica Simpson came up around the same time as Britney Spears, and the two were constantly compared. They were both bubbly, blonde, raised religious in the South, and they both made music with suggestive themes. And while Britney was coy about her purity status, Jessica was out and proud about her virginity.
Jessica Simpson projects sexuality in her music videos, but in real life, Jessica has made a more conservative choice. Tonight, in a remarkably candid interview, the star talks about her decision.
I've held on to it for this long, and I only have 3 more months to go.
What Jessica has held on to is her virginity. In 3 months, the singer will be marrying Nick Lachey from 98 Degrees.
I'm a hopeless romantic, and there's that one thing that I want to share with my husband. If you really want to hold that close to your heart and be innocent about that, it's definitely possible.
Jessica says that one former boyfriend actually broke up with her because she wouldn't have sex with him.
Luckily, I found a guy who respected it and adored it.
Jessica's fiance at the time, Nick Lachey, went on Howard Stern's show and was talking about how he just loves to deflower virgins, I guess. I don't know. It's gross.
Was she your first virgin? Well, no. Man, I've never had a virgin. No one.
He's had 2.
Can you imagine? You see what a loser I am?
Well, that is gross. Nick was not the only man in Jessica's life that spoke inappropriately about her body. In an interview with GQ, her own father said, in regards to Jessica's chest, Jessica never tries to be sexy. She just is sexy. If you put her in a t-shirt or you put her in a bustier, she's sexy in both. She's got double Ds. You can't cover those suckers up. Later on down the Disney purity timeline, we start hearing about this new class of abstinent teen stars.
Staying pure, so you really believe in no sex before marriage? No, I don't at all.
And what you need to know about this era of the Disney Channel is that these kids weren't just co-stars, but they were also friends, professional colleagues, and oftentimes bullies, but we won't be getting into that today. Some of this group dated each other, or should I say, some of this group dated members of the Jonas Brothers. And since they were all supposedly Christian, as far as we were told, questions about purity arose. Not that I agree with those questions, because these are children, but society was a lot more gross back then.
Joe, you all wear silver purity rings, a symbol of values. How did this come about? Sure, let me see them.
Well, we were a lot younger, actually.
And you wear different clothes every time, right? I'm told that, right? You always
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we were young, you know. I was probably 11, 12 years old when we made the decision, and you know, we are happy with the decision we made.
And its purpose is?
You know, I think it's to treat women with respect and ladies with respect.
Do people ever kid you about them?
Not so much kidding. I think for us, you know, like we said, it is a private thing, something we like to keep private. But, you know, some people may not understand it, and that's fine. But it's something that we believe in, and it's a personal thing.
Is it hard? Going to be hard, Kevin? Well, you're 21, right?
Of course, no one's above temptation. No one's above life in general. And so for us, we're just trying to do our best every single day. And I think we've said this a lot, but we're just trying to make our mom proud.
Eventually, pretty much each member of this group would end up removing their purity rings for one reason or another, and each time they faced backlash from the purity community. Selena Gomez ended up removing hers after she started dating Justin Bieber. Interesting connection here with Selena Gomez and the Fundy Friday cinematic universe. She dated Justin Bieber. They eventually broke up. He married Hailey Baldwin, now Hailey Bieber, and They are both Christian and go to Hillsong, which is a hip, non-denominational megachurch that used to be known as a celebrity hotspot. Watch my video about Hillsong for more info because they had a hell of a downfall. But anyway, that's how Justin Bieber linked up with disgraced pastor Carl Lentz.
Carl, I want to get close like that wisp is to Justin. No, I want to get better. That's why we
I just want to love people more. I just want to love Carl more.
You're doing a good job with that.
So, man. For what it's worth, Justin Bieber now goes to church home. Not Hillsong anymore, but I mean, it's the same thing. Selena also cut ties with Hillsong, so at least we have that. Another fun fact, Hailey Bieber's dad is Stephen Baldwin, who is also religious and frequently stars in awful Christian movies such as I Fell in Love with a Church Girl, that also just so happens to star Ja Rule and T-Bone, who was in the Rick Raina Kenneth Copeland movies. And also, Adrienne Bailon is the main star of the movie, and she was in Cheetah Girls. And yes, she is also a Christian. Anyway, back to our story. The 2008 MTV Video Music Awards. Russell Brand was the host, and he kept making references to the Jonas Brothers purity rings all night long, and finally he made a long joke. I guess he thinks it's funny. I think he's describing sexual assault. He tells a fictional tale of taking all of the Jonas Brothers' virginities.
I mean, initially he was a little bit reluctant, but eventually he sort of saw that it was for the best.
Later in the night, Jordan Sparks, a fellow Christian, came to the Jonas Brothers' defense and had this to say.
I have one thing to say about promise rings. It's not bad to wear a promise ring because not everybody, guy or girl, wants to be a slut. All right.
Oh man, the 2000s were rotted. You know what? Russell Brand was not the only person to poke fun at the Jonas Brothers' purity that night. Yeah, that was Katy Perry singing Like a Jonas to the tune of Madonna's Like a Virgin. A clever throwback because Madonna performed that song at the VMAs all those years ago. What's not funny is that the Jonas Brothers were 15, 19, and 20-something at the time, and so it was inappropriate. Not as bad as Katie's future ex-husband Russell Brand's joke, but you get the point. It just is so disappointing hearing Katy Perry make fun of them because she grew up Christian, also in a Pentecostal home. Her parents are still preachers, I'm pretty sure. She likely had a purity ring, and you would hope that she would have empathy because she used to be a sheltered, introspective Christian teen too.
Me playing and writing and stuff, I do this for me and God. I do this as a release. I do this as a spiritual growth, actually. It's just some kind of, I think, unique communication that I can really connect with God, even in my room or on the stage. And I hope they see that, and I hope they just get something out of that and see that I'm a pretty bold person when it comes to my faith, and don't really care what other people think about me.
Also, while we're down this Katy Perry Christian rabbit hole side mission, did you know that she dated Matt Thiessen from Reliant K way back in the day? And she was also in a POD video. And she was actually discovered by Jennifer Knapp, who I love, by the way. Anyway, I know we keep going down different rabbit holes here, but the Jonas Brothers, their purity really was the topic of the town.
A big topic this week is purity rings. The Jonas Brothers are standing by, their guns, and so is Jordan Sparks. What's your stance on it?
Honestly, I think that the jokes that were made at the VMAs and stuff like that, the Jonas Brothers are amazing, and they have great attitudes about everything, and I think the way they've handled it has been amazing.
The Jonas Brothers are all grown up and have their own adult problems now, and they have since spoken out about how weird the whole situation was.
We were never going to talk about it because we were like, this is not who we... It's not for the world. It's not for the world. It's our own thing. But of course, you have 3 young boys wearing rings on their fingers. Everyone's like, are they married already? Like, what's going on here? What's happening? Purity rings were to wait for the right person when the time was right. And here's the catch. When you're like 12 and you do that, because we grew up in a church. Sure. And our dad was a pastor, and so like kind of just came natural for everyone that we grew up with to go through this and get one and say, I'm going to wait for the right person. Some people say, I'll wait till marriage.
Their dad, Kevin Jonas Sr., is some sort of music producer or record label owner or something. He owns Jonas Group Entertainment and Jonas Group Publishing, as well as Christ for the Nation Worship Music. And currently he is teaming up with Liberty University to work with students at the Michael W. Smith Music Center. And yes, it's that Michael W. Smith. So yeah, just an interesting connection. Anyway, do you think we should be wrapping this up? Rather than bringing back some Joycelyn Elders brand sanity to the whole thing, he instead seems to have leaned into the American religious right's perceived moral superiority on the subject, just the way his Democratic presidential predecessor Bill Clinton did. Not that it stopped his Republican opponents from characterizing him as a giant teen pregnancy promoter, as we can see in this John McCain TV ad from 2008.
Education Week says Obama hasn't made a significant mark on education, that he's elusive on accountability, a staunch defender of the existing public school monopoly. Obama's one accomplishment? Legislation to teach comprehensive sex education to kindergartners. Learning about sex before learning to read? Barack Obama. Wrong on education, wrong for your family.
I'm John McCain, and I approve this message.
And likewise, the American news media of the day was quick to highlight Obama's bold measures on the topic of sex education, particularly hammering how he stripped out the funding for abstinence-only sex education previously put into the budget by George W. Bush. I wanted to give Obama a little bit of credit because he did want comprehensive sex ed, but there was a Republican Congress, so not much could get done. SICUS, Sex Ed for Social Change, they have a timeline on their website that shows basically the history of sex ed in the United States and abstinence programs. And they point out that despite the proven failures of abstinence-only programs, Title V abstinence-only funding is resurrected by conservatives as a part of negotiations for the passage of the Affordable Care Act. And that keeps happening. Republicans will only vote for something that a Democrat wants if they compromise and allow in something that they want, or that's how it used to go. In 2011, Congress creates the Discretionary Competitive Abstinence Education Grant Program, carving out dollars from programs that supported more comprehensive approaches to sex education and funneling them towards another abstinence-only program. In 2015, Competitive Abstinence Education is replaced by another discretionary abstinence-only program called the Sexual Risk Avoidance Education Program. This is an attempt by abstinence-only advocates to rebrand their failed and unpopular programs by co-opting language used by sex education. I think it's interesting that they rebranded abstinence as sexual risk avoidance education. It's kind of clever, actually.
In April 2008, after decades of funding these ineffective shaming programs, Congress held the first ever hearing on abstinence-only until marriage programs. Witnesses included leading medical and sexual health experts from across the country who testified on the ineffectiveness of the programs, youth who spoke about the program's effect on their lives, and several government officials and members of Congress. The vast majority of researchers testified that abstinence-only until marriage programs were ineffective at getting young people to delay sexual initiation and had not been effective at reducing teen pregnancies or HIV and other STIs. They called for an end to federal funding for the programs and called for funds to instead be spent on comprehensive sexuality education that had been proven to be effective. This hearing marked the beginning of the end for the CBAE program. The following year, the program received its first ever cut and the program was finally ended in fiscal year 2010. After 2 years without federal discretionary funding for abstinence-only until marriage programs, Congress revived an annually appropriated competitive grant program. The Competitive Abstinence Education Program carved out dollars from teen pregnancy prevention funding that supported more comprehensive approaches to sex education. This new grant program was established within the Consolidated Appropriations Act of fiscal year 2012 and was administered by the ACF. Program requirements were tied to the Social Security Act Title V, Section 510B, A through H definition that was on the books at the time. Grantees were required to adhere to the exclusive purpose of abstinence education as defined by the A to H statute and provide mentoring, counseling, and adult supervision towards the promotion of abstaining from sex outside of marriage. As implemented by ACF, the programs had to be medically accurate. CAE provided 2-year grants to community and faith-based organizations and was funded at roughly $5 million per year for fiscal years 2012 to 2015. The discretionary SRAE competitive grant program replaced the CAE program in fiscal year 2016 appropriations. Administered by FYSB within ACF under HHS, the SRAE program was an attempt by abstinence-only advocates to rebrand their harmful, failed programs as quote-unquote sexual risk avoidance, or SRA. This rebranding reflects the language that the abstinence-only until marriage organization Ascend, previously called the National Abstinence Education Association, started using to overcome the negative characterization they felt abstinence-only programs had developed due to overwhelming evidence that the programs are, at their best, ineffective and, at their worst, harmful. In this rebranding effort, Ascend co-opted risk reduction language used by proponents of sex education and the public health community in order to make their programs seem more in line with experts in this field. But the substance of these programs remained the same. Shortly after Ascend's rebranding effort, its former CEO Valerie Huber was interviewed for Focus on the Family's magazine and explained, when we're talking about any potential risk behavior, the messaging and the skills around that should be designed to help that individual avoid all the risks. Shortly after this interview, Ms. Huber became the senior policy advisor for the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health at HHS, oversight of federal abstinence-only until marriage funding. Through the language of SRAE, Ms. Huber has made it clear that avoid all the risks translates to abstinence and avoiding sex.
Ever since Obama, it's been kind of a seesaw back and forth with each president. When the Democrats are in office, they cut the funding for abstinence only and increase the funding for comprehensive. And a Republican comes in office like Trump, who gives the funding back to the abstinence only. Then Joe Biden comes in, and he not only wants the comprehensive sex ed, but he's also trying to increase funding to give accurate education about trans people and sexual identity. And whoever is going to be the president next is probably going to put their own spin on it. But basically, it's just been a back and forth, and I haven't been to school in a long time, but I'm sure it's very frustrating and confusing for the teachers and the programs who can only operate with this federal funding, for good or bad. Everybody's just on their toes, and you know who suffers the most? It's the kids, because they have a right to learn about their own bodies, and these adults keep playing around. Purity culture is fucked up for many reasons, but mostly because its effects last way longer than just the time you're at the youth group or the time you're at the silver ring thing ceremony or choir the fire. Like, it affects you holistically, psychologically and physically. It affects people that can't have sex even after they're married because of trauma from purity culture. Abstinence only does not provide kids with vital information. They need to know this information. They are entitled to this information, and it's fucked up that we don't give it to them because of our weird adult political biases. It's not fair. Every child deserves comprehensive sex education. Every child deserves to know about the world. I'm shocked, but not really surprised at the history of politics behind it, and I think it's interesting to see how we got from Reagan to now, and the kinds of things that we were talking about then and the kinds of things we're talking about now, but it's still the same subject. You know, they say they're of the world, not in the world. They're in the world, and they're trying to influence it. Like, it's not just at their church, it's in public school. It affects every single child that goes to public school in America. Talk about, like, sex is a reality. It is something that they will need to know about. Even before it's sex talk, they need to know about their genitals, and they need to know about good and bad touch, and it's really shouldn't be treated like it's this big, horrible, weird thing they teach at school. Like, it's a part of life and they need to know about it. Nobody's grooming the fucking kids. If anybody's doing the grooming, it's not the fucking teachers in health class. And it's just, I really wish they wouldn't misuse that word, because it takes the punch out of how it really should be. Like, grooming is a very serious thing, and to call telling a kid about pronouns, calling that grooming, is really fucking stupid and irresponsible. I didn't know how much money was funded into these things until this episode, and holy shit, that's a lot. And it, like I said earlier, it explains a lot of the stuff that I went through growing up, because that was like literally the golden years of abstinence-only education. Golden for them, not for me. I feel for all of you that went through it. They went through that purity culture, like, because I went through like 1% of it, and you guys got the rest, and holy shit. If you survive that, you're watching now, I really appreciate it. And I really wish it wasn't that way. And I know the teachers are just trying their best, and they're trying to make a safe space for these kids, and they're trying to allow them to be themselves, but also have to deal with the angry parents showing up at school, showing up at town halls, making lawsuits, all because the teachers are just trying to help the kids. Holy shit. I don't know how long this episode is. I recorded for 4 hours, though, so not really sure. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed yourself. If you want to support us financially, we have Patreon and YouTube memberships. They do the same exact thing, except for YouTube, you get a little fun, like your name is a different color and there's emojis in the live chat on YouTube, but they do the same thing. We have $1 and $3 tiers. Of course, you don't have to give anything, but I would appreciate if you give a like, share, subscribe, comment, all the good stuff. It feeds the algorithm. The algorithm's hungry and you have to feed it. I always have links in the info box, sources for my work. I also have, my website. We have merch. I have merch fundraisers, 2 different things. Yeah, we have fundyfridays.shop, which houses all of our new designs, lots of good stuff, including Overweight Sexually Broken Loser, Fungi Fridays, Atheist Nightmare, Vampire Hoe, and the classic logo. The Bonfire Shop is still open, and those shirts collect money for different charities. And the Fourth Wall Shop and the Bonfire Shop are the only official merch stores we have. Some of my designs have ended up on bootleg websites, which is unfortunate because I feel like if they liked it, then they would probably be a Jennonite. But unfortunately, that just comes with it. In my link tree, which is in the info box, I have all the articles and podcasts I've been featured on, as well as fundraisers I'm participating, including Creators for Palestine. Just follow the link in the link tree, and it'll take you there. Yeah, Patreon gets you behind-the-scenes videos, and I'm working on one right now, but I'm really hesitant to work on it because it has a lot of footage of Elvis. Yeah, the Patreon's great. You get access to the Discord, which is like a messaging forum thing. And on Discord, we watch a movie or a show every Monday. Monday Night Fellowship. We just watched Hillbilly Elegy, and I think we're going to start up Plathville again. And so that's been really fun. And I just really appreciate you guys and everything you do for us and all the support and love, and I'm very grateful for this community. I recently just had the 5-year anniversary of Fundy Fridays, put out a 3-hour-long clip show. I highly recommend it. It kind of shows you where a lot of the inside jokes and lore come from Fundy Fridays. So I just had the 5-year anniversary, and I've just been doing a lot of reflecting and like thinking about how I want the channel to change, how I want it to stay the same. I'm just trying to be really grateful for what I have and what you guys give me, and I'm so grateful and thankful. Like, if I didn't have that, I it's okay if I don't do this forever, but I really want to appreciate it while I can. And I want you to know that I never take that for granted. I really appreciate it. And so I'm going to end the video now by talking about something very sad. So if you don't want to watch that, go ahead and click off now. But we took the week off last week. That's why we didn't post anything. Because my dog Elvis, the dachshund, he got really sick and his spleen burst and he died very suddenly. He was fine in the morning and then he was gone by 8 p.m. He was 10. He was my first dog ever. And me and James got him after being together for a year, and he was James's mom's dog, and she named him Elvis. She didn't want to keep him because he kept running out into the road, and so we took him, and he didn't even know me, and he jumped in my lap, And from that moment on, he was mine. So we had him for 9 years, and he's been there for every moment of my life as an adult. And he had so many friends. Everybody that ever met him loved him. He was always down to party. I thought we had a lot longer with him. We'd just taken him to the vet. He'd just gotten groomed. I know he doesn't even have any fur and he got groomed, but they cut his nails, do his ears and stuff. It was just really, really sudden. And the kindness that you guys showed me just completely restored my faith in humanity. And I'm so sad that so many of you could relate. You know how many people told me stories of their animals going just like that? It made me so sad that they had gone through that. And Elvis is so famous and like ubiquitous with the channel. It feels like he was your dog too. Not was. I mean, so many of you, I mean, he's an emoji in the chat. He's the picture that shows up when you get on Discord. He's on the channel logo. He's on the merch. I'm not getting rid of him. He's gonna stay there because he is the channel mascot. And we all love him. It gets better every day, but it's still really sad and hard. And I think about him like every hour. Like, I don't think I can go very long without thinking about him. Anytime I'm alone with my thoughts. I have a tortoiseshell cat and a black cat, and they always look like him out of the corner of my eye. I keep checking for him when I take Marshall outside, and it couldn't have gone better the way it ended, but it's still sad. I got to be with him, which means the world to me. We would not have been able to take care of him in the final moments without you guys' financial support. And this is not me asking for money. I'm just trying to thank you and tell you that what you guys give us really does have, like, effects in the real world. We were able to get him every test that they offered. No questions. Just put it on the card. Every test he needed. And the painkillers that he needed. And then, I mean, all this stuff costs money, and we were able to get, you know, him cremated and get, you know, a little plaque and stuff because you guys pay our bills. And to think that I wouldn't be able to do that 5 years ago, it just fucking breaks my heart. But thank you guys so much. Even if you don't give us money, over 12,000 people liked my post on Instagram, and they left like hundreds and hundreds of comments. I feel every single one of those. I read every single one of them. Even if I don't heart them, I'm reading them. Sometimes I'm just overwhelmed, you know, and I have to keep scrolling. But the people who have reached out, the people who have texted me, Tim from the New Evangelicals paid for our dinner that night. He didn't have to do that. I got texts from people from my hometown. I got texts from people that I hadn't heard of in forever because of my little dog. Thank you guys so much for everything. For giving me a career. For being nice. For making me laugh. For being so nice about my dog. Thank you guys again, and I hope you enjoyed the video. There's stuff in the info box. Check it out if you want. I love you guys. Obviously, I love you guys. I wouldn't be fucking crying my eyes out if I didn't love you. And I hope you do something awesome this weekend. And I hope you hold your animals really close. And I hope you consensually smash that like and subscribe button. And, God bless. I'll see you next week.
He's a kissy boy. Marshall, look, he giving up. He's damn done. Marshall? This is hilarious. This is going to be such good B-roll.
Lower it down. Like that.
You doofus. You giant. He's trying.
Marty, baby.
You ever felt more loved in your life?
No. All right.